A very good morning and good afternoon to all of you, based on where you are. Welcome to our webinar on optimizing the prescription benefit process. And I would also like to thank you for taking out the time to be here with us. I am Diya Ranjan, Marketing Manager at Bizmatics. And I have Om Thakur, Senior Product Manager, Bizmatics, with me as my co-organizer. So in today's session, we will discuss e-prescription best practices with a special focus on real-time prescription benefit and how it leads to greater price transparency and medication adherence. We do have a few success stories also along with it. And finally, a demonstration of the entire workflow within Prognosis. So joining me in today's session is a dynamic team of presenters, both from SureScripts and Bizmatics. And let me introduce you all to them. We have Collins. Collins is a solution engineer at SureScripts, along with Katie. She is the customer success engineer from SureScripts, and Debbie. Debbie is the alliance partner marketing manager from SureScripts. From Bizmatics, we have Mayuri Karkanes. She is our implementation training manager, and she would be going over the workflow of the real-time prescription benefit within Prognosis. So before we begin, a few housekeeping items that I would like to tell you about. We do have a question and answer session at the end. So please type in your questions at the question box on the right-hand corner of the screen and send it to us. We will answer them in order we receive. We will also be conducting a few polls during the session, and I would highly encourage you to participate because your answers would be very, very important for us. The recording of this webinar, along with the slides and a video of real-time prescription benefit would be available to you via a follow-up email after the webinar. Prognosis users can also use that in the webinar resource center. Is available after the webinar. We currently have a handout on questions with your patients as a PDF, which you can download anytime during the course of this presentation. So let's begin this session. And here is a poll for you. I would request all of you to answer the question. The question is, have you used real-time prescription benefit information anytime? And the answers are, I have used it. I have used it in Prognosis, I have used it in another EMR, or I have not used it as yet. And here are the answers. So the first answer is yes, I have used it, is 25%. I have used it in other EMR, 8%, and I have not used it as yet. So with this, I would like to go ahead and hand it over to Colin. And Colin, you can take it from here.
Great, thank you so much, Diya. Hi, everybody. This is Colin Remblum with SureScripts. Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're dialing in today. As Diya mentioned, we are joining our Bizmatics team for the presentation today to talk to you about prescription price transparency. This tool is designed to also optimize your patient's prescription experience, and we'll talk about many ways in which that's accomplished. The tool through SureScripts is called Real-Time Prescription Benefit. If you are not familiar with SureScripts, I will just spend a minute talking about us. We have been partners with Bizmatics and specifically for the Prognosis application for several years. You will most likely hear our name in reference to electronic prescribing. Quite often that service is utilized by your providers or prescribers anytime they're writing a prescription electronically and sending that prescription over to the pharmacy for the patient to pick up. That service tends to be used very frequently by our customers. Last year alone, we did several billion electronic prescriptions. So that service is very robust, very reliable, and quite often we kind of take it for advantage, just that it's gonna work all the time with that electronic prescribing service. So that's a little bit about background for SureScripts and kind of what brings us to this conversation today. Now, kind of using that same topic, Generally speaking, when we prescribe medications and send them electronically over to the pharmacy, we tend to lose sight of the patient workflow at that point. As a provider or as an end user, that prescription has left the prognosis application, been sent over to the pharmacy, and we hope that the patient shows up and is able to fill their prescription and start taking that new drug therapy. In reality, there are several areas where that kind of happy path that I just described can go wrong. In many scenarios, patients leave the pharmacy still today in time without their prescription, and that can be for a variety of reasons. I will just name a few of those. One of the things that we hear very common is that sticker shock. Patients show up at the pharmacy, they are hit with a price tag for the prescription, and they simply can't afford it, or they refuse to pay that cost for that prescription, and they abandon that prescription and don't take it. One of the other areas that's common is prior authorization delays. So when the medication requires the patient's health plan to submit a prior authorization, or rather approve that medication before that patient can start taking it, that is also a very common scenario where patients fail to take that medication. And that's obviously not good when that is a medication that that patient needs. Now, to compound that, for our clinic users and for your providers, when the patient does not take that medication, it typically means added work for you. It means that the pharmacy is going to generally reach out to you, try to call you or submit a fax, and they're going to try to change that prescription after the fact. And that's also not good from a workflow standpoint, because that's going to take time away from your users and their busy schedules. You do not need to take my word for that. That is a very common scenario that we face today in time. We recently validated that through a poll of 1,000 patients who had recently picked up a prescription. And we found that there were two very common scenarios for patients that were taking those prescriptions. Over half of the participants in that poll admitted to not taking a medication because of that cost. So knowing what that cost is incredibly important to patients. And we also see a rise in patient consumerism taking place. Patients, generally speaking, want to know the cost of their care, and that includes medications, up front. And when they don't have that experience, it is a dissatisfier for patients. Also very common, about 29% of patients said they did not take a medication because it wasn't ready for them. It was not filled when they tried to pick up that prescription. That could, of course, be for a variety of reasons. Prior authorization, as I mentioned, is a large factor in delaying that patient to start that drug therapy. But whatever the reason, many patients also reported not picking up that medication because of that delay. So in order to combat those problems that I've described, we've launched our real-time prescription benefit tool with our partners like Bismatics. And what that service does is provide a very quick and concise look into that patient's prescription benefit coverage. And this process actually takes place, we will show you some screenshots of that process taking place today in time, but it actually takes place before the prescription is written and sent electronically to the pharmacy. So today in time, with your existing workflow, your providers will go in, they will order a medication, and then they can see coverage information directly from SureScripts. And this takes place in a very quick transaction. You can identify coverage restrictions or alerts for medications. So for instance, if there is an age limit or a quantity limit for that particular health plan for that patient, you can be made aware of those limitations right up front. In addition, the provider can be made aware that a prior authorization exists, that if they order that medication, they will expect a prior authorization to be needed before the patient can start taking that medication. And so that's a very valuable item to proactively tell your patients that that prior authorization criteria exists. Now, on top of that, we also break down and provide a lot of pricing information for you. And this is something new that you most likely have not experienced in the past. But what it will do is actually go through the patient's health plan and tell you down to the penny what that patient should expect to pay for that prescription when they go to that pharmacy. It is pharmacy specific as well. So depending on where you are trying to send that prescription, you can actually see several options for that patient. You can see if there is a cheaper alternative quantity. So for instance, if that medication is more reasonable cost-wise to fill for a 30-day supply or a 90-day supply, you can see that information right up front. Additionally, because we are getting this information directly from the health plans who are responsible for your patients, most of the health plans are starting to share things like the patient's out-of-pocket and deductible status, and you can see that information directly through your prognosis application now. That's an incredibly valuable tool, especially if you have a very cost-conscious patient and they're asking, where they're at in their deductible status or where that medication will do to their deductible. The ability to have that information is very nice. And as I mentioned, most of our health plan partners are starting to share that information. It's not 100% yet, but they're turning on those fields more and more. Now, kind of last but not least here, you can see alternative drugs. So for instance, if I'm trying to prescribe a name brand medication for that patient, the health plan can suggest up to 5 cheaper or therapeutic equivalent drugs. And those are just suggestions that the health plan will send back. It does not mean that your provider has to switch medications from what they originally intended. But in many scenarios, if there is a cheaper equivalent alternative drug, it's nice to know about that information. And you also see all of the associated prices for those alternative drugs that are displayed in response. Now, this is a lot of information for you to consume. This is certainly a lot of new information being added into that e-prescribing workflow. But what this really does provide is for your providers to have that direct engagement with the patient and to talk about those medication choices that make the most sense based upon that individual patient. Katie will follow me in our presentation today, and she'll have some great tips about how to start that conversation as well. This is a relatively new service. The real-time prescription benefit tool is relatively new to the industry. We piloted that service in 2017 with a select number of participants. And ever since then, it has been growing very, very quickly. We saw some great adoption in 2018. We signed many partners for real-time prescription benefit in 2019. We actually saw over 250,000 prescribers start to use that service. And in 2020, we are well ahead of target to exceed kind of goals where we're going to see some unparalleled growth with this real-time prescription benefit tool. In fact, over the last 20 years that we have been in business, this real-time prescription benefit tool has had the quickest adoption out of any product we've ever brought to market. So it kind of illuminates the need for this type of service in the industry today. Now, even with that being said, there are some limitations to real-time prescription benefit. It is a relatively new tool. We are, of course, working to solve that problem. And as a network, we work with our partners like Bismatics. We also work with our partners on the health plan and pharmacy benefit manager side of business, or PBM side of business. And since we've offered this real-time prescription benefit service, I'm happy to say that over 95% of patients in the US have this service available to them through their health plan. So really what that means is that you should start to see a lot of health plans turning on this feature, starting to share this type of data with your providers so that when they're prescribing those medications, they can now get access to this patient level detail that they so commonly need. I know from the poll, there was a subset of participants, I think it was 8% that had seen the real-time prescription benefit tool outside of Bismatics. We have a lot of prescribers that now have access to this real-time prescription benefit tool, and we're very happy to offer it through Prognosis to you today.
So my name's Katie. I'm a customer success engineer at SureScripts. And here are a few simple best practices to follow when you're using real-time prescription benefit. Following these best practices will just allow you and your patients to achieve the best results from this product. So the first one you see is ensuring that a patient's benefit is selected prior to prescribing the medication. Real-time prescription benefit is looking to the patient's benefit to send the request to make sure that the request is going to the correct benefit manager. So if a benefit is not selected, then the real-time prescription benefit transaction cannot take place. Additionally, if the patient has multiple coverages on file, you will want to talk to the patient to ensure that the correct coverage is selected. So hopefully there's already a workflow in place where either the nurse who's doing intake or at patient check-in, they are confirming the patient's benefits and selecting that. And this is just a reminder that that will need to take place prior to running a real-time prescription benefit transaction. The second item is entering the day's supply. Without a day's supply entered, the benefit plan does not know what quantity they are providing pricing for. The day's supply must be populated to receive an accurate pricing response from the payer. And then lastly, that you'll see on the far right there, we want this data to empower you to have cost conversations with the customer. We do recognize that these are conversations that you may not be having right now with the patient. So if you want to go ahead and jump to the next slide, what we've done is put together some cost conversation starters that you can have with your patients about the cost of their prescriptions. So these conversations can take place with the nurse or with the provider. So some examples that you'll see here are, you can simply say, some of my patients have had a hard time paying for all of their medications. Has the cost of your prescriptions ever been an issue for you? You can also just let them know about the new functionality and say, I have this new system that allows me to check your insurance plan for alternative medications that may save you some money and work just as well. Let's take a look at the information together. Another example you'll see here is if you are working with a patient and they've been on a medication, but you haven't seen the expected result from that medication, you can use that to begin the conversation. You can just very candidly say, I'm not seeing the response I expected from your medication. One thing that gets in the way for some patients is the cost. They might skip doses to make the prescription last longer. Then just ask, would it be helpful if we tried to find a less expensive medication? You can say, I know we've talked about using this drug to treat your condition. However, I think there might be some alternatives that would work well for you and cost less. I have a new solution that can show us that information. Let's review our options. And the last one you'll see here is just saying, I have a medication in mind. Before I prescribe it, I'm going to check your insurance plan to check out-of-pocket costs and see if there are any alternatives that would cost less but be just as effective. So again, we want to recognize that these are new conversations that you are having with your patients, that you might not be used to discussing money or the price of medication with your patients. So in order to be transparent about that potential challenge, we just wanted to throw some examples here to kind of get your minds turning on how you might begin having these conversations with your patients.
Hello, my name is Debbie McNamara, and we appreciate your time today, and we appreciate the partnership, as we've mentioned, with Bizmatics. They've been wonderful to work with, so you're in good hands there. One of the things I just wanted to share with you, we do have some marketing materials that are available to Bizmatics to share with you. In fact, one of those pieces, as Dia mentioned, is over in the handout section of the webinar. So I encourage you to take a look at that information, and it just summarizes some of the things that Katie and Colin have just shared with you today. One other thing that I'd like to mention is, sometimes it is hard to have that cost conversation. I think now more than ever, people are definitely watching their financial situations. So we appreciate that the information being shared to you today. One other thing just to highlight that Dia mentioned is we have an animated video on real-time prescription benefit. She'll share the link with you after the call today. Just take a few minutes, it's less than 2 minutes to watch that video. It just helps to paint the picture and pull all of those details together so that it makes sense to you and to your staff. I wanted just to share briefly with you today one example of a physician that I spoke with in Texas. She's a pediatrician, and she made a comment that patients know the cost of their medication before they ever leave the office. And I asked her for like benefits of, how does that benefit the patient? How does that benefit you? And she said, well, I receive fewer phone calls from the pharmacy. I also have fewer prior authorizations, as the examples that we've discussed with you today. If there's a less expensive medication that's an option, that you don't need a prior authorization. So that's another benefit. And also, she said that she receives fewer parent phone calls because before they leave the office, they know what that medication is going to cost them. So there is no sticker shock once they arrive at the pharmacy. And in summary, she just said this real-time prescription benefit just helps with the physical, mental, and emotional needs while having that cost conversation during the visit, while you're face-to-face, whether it be virtually or in person. It helps to have that conversation and makes everyone feel that you're looking out for their best interest. So thank you for your time today. We really appreciate your time, and I'll turn it back over to Dia.
So Mayuri, so before we begin, go ahead, I would want to launch another poll. And the question is, what do you feel are the factors that contribute to poor medication adherence? Is it the medication cost? Is it the patient education? Or is it the delays in the order fulfillment? So I would ask you to put in your responses, and I will shortly have it open for everybody. So here are the responses for the question. What do you feel are the factors that contribute to poor medication adherence? Medication cost is there, patient education 20%, and delays in the order fulfillment is 10%. So I think medication cost definitely is the maximum that we can see here. So with this, I hand it over to Mayuri. And Mayuri, you can take it from here.
Thank you so much, Dia. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Mayuri, and I am the implementation training manager here at Bizmatics. Before I begin, I wanted to thank Colin, Katie, and Debbie for sharing that information with us. And I'm sure it's going to help our customers a lot, especially the cost conversation starters. So thank you for that great information you shared with us today. So what I want to do now is I want to talk to you about how all of this information that has been shared with you so far is going to come together in prognosis and how you can make that work for you. So a couple of questions that we want to answer for you today. First off, where and how can you access this information inside of prognosis? We also want to talk about any mandatory steps or any prerequisites that you need to have in place before you access this information. I'll also talk about what kind of information can you expect to see and give you a visual. We will also be doing a demonstration today, so you will definitely see a lot of what we have spoken about so far. So in prognosis, accessing prescription benefit information is easy because we have made it available on the prescription screen right before you send out the prescription, and this information is going to be patient specific and it's going to be available in real time. There are two very important things that I wanted to point out before we go into the demonstration and talk about the process. The first thing is that there are two pieces of information that this service can provide to us. The first is the formulary information, and the second is the actual prescription benefit information, which has the cost of the medication and a lot of other details actually. So the bare minimum information that you need to enter in order to pull in formulary details is simply the drug name and the drug strength, and the system pulls out formulary information for you. But the most important thing I wanted to point out here is the eligibility for the patient has to be selected first. So whenever you go into your patient encounter to send out a prescription, the very first thing we should be doing is looking at whether eligibility is selected for the patient. And in prognosis, we have a visual indicator for that. I will be talking about that during the demonstration as well today. So as long as your patient's prescription eligibility is selected and you enter the drug name and strength, you have available to you formulary information to review. And if you take that further and enter the other details for the drug, such as the dosage, the unit, and the pharmacy details, along with the eligibility and the drug name and strength, you will then have available to you the real-time prescription benefit information. And that is what we want to show you today. So there are 4 simple steps you need to follow in order to incorporate the real-time prescription benefit process in your day-to-day prescribing e-prescribing workflow. And these are the 4 steps. So the very first one, as I spoke about earlier, is to make sure that the eligibility for the patient is selected. Step 2 is to enter the details of the intended drug that you want to prescribe to the patient. And as soon as you do that in real time, you will have available to you the prescription benefit information. So step 3 is to review the information available to you and look at alternative prescribing options. And step 4 is, of course, to make a decision finally and then send out the prescription for the patient. So with that said, I would like to move into our prognosis demo database now and show you a quick demonstration of how all of this will look in prognosis, and we will be looking at a few examples to make it very clear for all of us. So I'm logged in here into our demo database, West Bay Clinic, and I'm logged in as a provider, Henry Jones in this case, and I have a couple of patients on my home screen. And I'm going to go through each one of these to show you how each patient may have unique information presented depending on a host of factors. So let's start with our first patient here, Cara Whiteside. I'm going to click on her name, and that takes me to the patient's encounter. On my encounter, I would typically send out prescriptions from the prescription screen available on the left from the table of contents. And when I go into my prescription screen, depending on my specific practice workflow and my specific practice setup, I may either have a blank screen and I can start typing out the names of medications, or I may have medications coming over from a previous encounter. But the most important thing, or the very first thing you need to do when you come to this screen, is to take a quick look at the eligibility button. Now, this button acts as your visual indicator. If the button shows up with red font, it means that the eligibility for this patient, Cara, is not selected. And if it is available with a white font, it means that the eligibility for the patient is already selected. So it's clear from here that for our patient right now, we do need to go in and select the eligibility. Now, this is not something you may have to do for every patient and every encounter, because when you first open the encounter for a patient, prognosis finds the eligibility based on the patient's first and last name, their date of birth, their gender, and their zip code. And if a perfect match is found, the eligibility will already be selected for you. Now, by chance, if the eligibility is not already selected and you see a red indicator like that, you would need to click on the eligibility button, and you will be presented all the possible plans under which the patient could be covered for prescription benefit. Now, as we can see in our sample patient here, we do have 3 different plans under which the patient could be covered. And as you can see on the left, I have a selection radio button for each of these plans for me to select the eligibility. So I'm going to select the second plan available here by clicking on the radio button. Once I make my selection, I see that the eligibility button has changed color to white. I do need to click on the update button as well. And once I do that, I will have available to me real-time prescription benefit information. Now, once eligibility is selected for the patient, the next step, of course, is to enter the details of the drug, which in our case, I have pre-populated just to save on time and make sure we have everything ready. So this drug that I have entered, as soon as I enter the drug name and strength, I will have access to formulary information, but as we can see here, we have all the details of the drug already entered, such as the drug dosage, quantity, the pharmacy, all of the details are filled in. So at this point, I may also have the real-time prescription benefit information available to me. Now, before we actually look at the real-time prescription benefit information screen, I also wanted to point out this pop-up right here, known as the therapeutic alternatives pop-up. As we see from the pop-up, it gives you a list of other equivalent drugs, generic equivalent drugs that you could prescribe instead of the drug that you intend to prescribe. And depending on whether the information is available, you may also see the formulary status of the drug, as well as the average copay and the average cost of the drug that the patient may have to pay. So with that said, I want to talk about the real-time prescription benefit information, which has already loaded for us for this particular medication for this patient. That is indicated by the blinking RTPB icon that we see here. If you have a blinking RTPB icon, it means you have real-time prescription benefit information available to you. So let's take a quick look at the information present on the screen. So once I click on the real-time prescription benefit screen or button, this is the screen I land on. And this is where I have a lot of different pieces of information that may be very useful to me. So up here at the top, we have the details of the drug that we originally intend to prescribe. And that is followed up with the coverage information for the drug. For example, Celexa 20 mg tablet is going to require a prior authorization as indicated by yes under the PA column. And we see that the drug status signals to us that the drug is covered, but with some restrictions. Now on the screen, I also wanted to point out that there are multiple pharmacy channels presented to you. For example, you have the mail order pharmacy option here. In prognosis, the mail order pharmacy option is always going to be available with a yellow background as a visual indicator, and the retail pharmacy channel is going to be available with a white background. So we have multiple channel options available to you. I would also like to show you that the estimated patient payment amount is available for all channels. And what we do for you is the lowest cost option is highlighted for you with bold font. For example, right now, I see that the retail pharmacy channel is the lowest cost option, which is highlighted with the bold font. Then we have some other details related to cost, such as the deductible, what would be the deductible remaining amount, the out-of-pocket applied amount, and the remaining amounts. So the level of information on this screen depends on what information is available, but all information available is going to be displayed on this window for you. Next, we have the coverage alerts. Now, these coverage alerts could be for a host of reasons. For example, right now we see that I have some age limits to prescribe this medication. I see that. And I also have a quantity limit sometimes. For example, here it says that retail coverage is limited to a 30-day supply. So coverage alerts will give you a lot of information that tells you about anything else you need to know. This is followed by your pharmacy details, such as the pharmacy name, the address, and pharmacy identifiers. Now, once you review the cost information for the medication you want to prescribe, you may also have access to other lower cost alternatives. So this right here, the therapeutic alternatives information section, is going to give you the options. For example, I have some alternate drugs here for this patient that I could prescribe instead of the original Celexa that I plan to prescribe. So as we can see here, every alternative drug is also presented to you with the cost information, and we have around 3 to 4 different alternatives available for me to review. Each time you have information presented to you, you will see the lowest cost option highlighted with bold. So we see that there is a considerable difference in the cost of the prescription that I originally intend to prescribe versus the alternative options presented to me. So this screen could show you a maximum of up to 5 different alternatives, and based on these, you could make a decision of which prescription you finally would like to send for the patient. So I'm going to show you a couple of more examples today. So let's go into another patient. let's look at our patient Juan here. So I'm once again going into his prescription screen. And as soon as I come to the prescription screen, I want to make sure that my eligibility is selected, which in our case is already set for this patient. So I don't need to click on that and set the eligibility. I could start typing in the name of my drug and start entering the prescription details. So as we can see here, we are trying to prescribe the Flonase allergy relief spray to the patient. And I already have my therapeutic alternatives pop-up showing up on my screen. And I also have the blinking RTPB icon indicating that there is real-time prescription benefit information available to me. So once I enter the details of my drug, I might want to take a quick look by clicking on the RTPB button once more. And again, I have the details of the medication I want to prescribe and the coverage information. Now here I'm presented with my mail order and retail pharmacy channels. And as I can see here, no prior authorization is required for this medication. The drug status says that the drug is covered, and we can see the clear difference here. For a mail order channel, you do have coverage with some restrictions, whereas for the retail channel, it says that the drug is covered. I also see the formulary status of the drug as well as the estimated patient payment amount. And once again, the lowest cost alternative is always going to be highlighted with bold font. Then we have the pharmacy details and any other coverage alerts that may be present for this particular medication. And that is followed by any therapeutic alternatives and the cost associated with the other alternatives that are showing up on my screen. So once again, as we can see, there is a little bit of a difference in the cost compared to what I originally planned to prescribe. Now here I see that there are two alternatives available to me. So the number of alternatives could vary, but the system can show you a maximum of up to 5 different alternatives. Let's go into one more patient example. I'm going to go into the patient Baxter now. Once again, going into the prescription screen, making sure that the eligibility for the patient is already selected. I would proceed to enter my drug details. And once I enter my drug details, instantly I will have access to the real-time prescription benefit information as indicated by the blinking RTPB icon. Now here I'm trying to prescribe the Bustrion 10 mg tablet to the patient. And to take a look at the cost details, I'm going to click on the RTPB button. Once again, I see the details of the drug at the top and then the coverage information. Now here we can clearly see that there are again two channels, the mail order pharmacy option indicated with a yellow background, and we have the drug status followed by the estimated patient payment amount. And of course, the lower cost alternative is highlighted with bold font. Now, here on the screen, I notice that there are no therapeutic alternatives available. So I would like to take this chance to explain to you that the information coming up on this screen is highly dependent on what is available on the prescription benefit manager. So if I have therapeutic alternatives available, I'm going to have that information available to me. But sometimes you may have simply 1 to 2 different alternatives and sometimes no information available at all. Let's go into our patient Margaret here, into her prescription screen. So for Margaret, I already have the eligibility selected as indicated by the white font, and I'm trying to prescribe to her the Orkambi 100 mg tablet, and I have my real-time prescription benefit information already available to me as indicated by the blinking icon. I'm going to click on it to review that information, and we see that this time I get a message that the drug is not covered because the pharmacy that I've chosen is out of network. Now, during such occasions, it might be useful to talk to the patient and see if there is a different pharmacy that they would want to go to pick up the medication. So I could close out of this screen, go back and change my pharmacy and see if I have a suitable fit. Or I could also look at the eligibility and check if there are any other plans under which the patient's medication could be covered. So I'm going to click on the eligibility button, and I see that for this patient, I do have another plan under which they are likely to be covered for the medication. So I can change by clicking on the radio button here, switch to a different eligibility option. And as soon as I update the information, I will have new information on the real-time prescription benefit button. So I wanted to point out here that whenever I change information like the pharmacy or the drug strength or the drug name, this information is going to be updated instantly, and I may have new information that I want to review. So let's take a quick look at whether the drug would be covered by the second plan. Now we see here that the drug is covered with some restrictions. However, there is a prior authorization that's going to be required for the drug. So in this manner, you could adjust the details on your screen to check for the best possible fit for the patient. So we are going to look at one final example right now. Let's go into Winston's encounter here, into his prescription screen. So for this patient, Winston, eligibility is selected, and I am trying to prescribe to him a brand name medication called Glucophage XR. The brand name medication is indicated by the uppercase G in the drug name, and my therapeutic alternatives pop-up shows me that there are some generic alternatives that you could prescribe. The generic alternatives are always in all lowercase. So I do have this information available to me on the therapeutic alternatives pop-up, but if I wanted to see the exact prescription cost, I would need to access the real-time prescription benefit information. Now here we see that I do not have the blinking RTPB icon. What this means is that the real-time prescription benefit information for this medication, for this particular pharmacy, with the eligibility plan chosen for the patient is not available to me. However, I still have formulary information available to me. So at this point, if I wanted to review the formulary information, I could go into the 3 dots button here, labeled formulary info, and I can take a look at the formulary info that is available to me, but I do not have the real-time prescription benefit information available to me. So I can quickly take a look by going into the eligibility button to see if there are any other plans under which the patient could be covered for this medication. So let me quickly click on that. And I see that yes, my patient does have another plan. I have this plan selected currently, and once I switch, I may have new information available for me to review. So instantly, the moment I change the eligibility plan for the patient, I have new information, and now I can take a look at the prescription benefit information for the Glucophage XR tablet that I'm about to prescribe to my patient. So let's click on RTPB, and we see here it says that this medication is not covered because the brand of this medication is not covered by this particular plan. And it does tell me under coverage alerts that only generic equivalents have coverage. So if I scroll down in the screen, I do see that there is one therapeutic alternative presented to me, which is the metformin HCl tablet, and I see that it is covered. Now here I can see that there is just one pharmacy channel, which is the mail order pharmacy channel available to me, and I see that the estimated patient payment amount is available to me. So based on this information, I can make an informed decision and make sure that I prescribe the best medication, not only which is medically fit for the patient, but also cost-wise. So with that, I am done with our demonstration for the day. And I believe at this point we have, Dia has a poll question for all of you. So Dia, can we please have the poll question?
Sure. So the poll question, the real-time prescription benefit will help you write prescriptions that have higher chances of medication adherence. So the options are fully agree, somewhat agree, and do not agree. So yeah, I will leave it open for some more time. So just to share, the answers that we got, it's like 56% fully agree with it and 44% somewhat agree with it. So I think maybe we would be sharing a lot of resources with you along with the video, and I think that will really help you to kind of change your your perception. I would hope that you would be looking to fully agree with it. With that said, and before we move on ahead, I really would like to thank all our panelists, Colin, Katie, Debbie, and Mayuri, for this important yet insightful session on real-time prescription benefit, the advantages it has for you and your patients, and also having candid yet comfortable cost conversations with your patients. So thank you all. We are moving ahead to the question and answer sessions, and I do have a few questions with me. At this point of time, I also wanted to tell you that we have our product experts, Prasanna and Amod, also from the team, to be here and answer your questions. So let me begin. The very first question is, does the clinic need to subscribe to get an RTPB module? And if it does, what is the cost?
Hi, Dia, this is Om. So I will take up that question. So there's no cost involved in it. It basically is a part of the e-prescription module, which you get along with Prognosis when you sign up with us.
Okay. So moving on to the next question. Will I be able to get real-time prescription benefit information for all of my patients?
As it has been shown by SureScripts, they basically cover over 95% of patients across the states. So in most of the cases, you would be able to get the coverage information.
Okay. Moving on, the next question is, sometimes eligibility is red in color. I cannot do it, reason. Would you want to take on that? Sometimes eligibility is red in color.
Sure.
And I do it.
There could actually be multiple reasons. One of the reasons you must have basically seen is the eligibility has not been selected. So if you click on the eligibility button, it will open up the pop-up and it will show you if the patient has multiple eligibilities, you would be able to select it from the radio button. If the patient does not have any plans at all, that is also one of the reasons that the button is basically appearing in red color. Or there could also be an issue with the patient's demographic information. There's a mismatch in patient's demographic information that is present in Prognosis versus what is there with PBM. So if you just go ahead and update the patient's demographic information, you would be able to fetch the patient's plans.
All right. Moving ahead, the next question. For controlled substance, is PDPM lookup available?
So we have medication history that we fetch from pharmacies and also from PBMs that is available on the current medication screen and also on the prescription screen that you would be able to get. As far as getting the medications from CA PDMP, that is one of the projects that we would be releasing very soon. But in the meanwhile, as I said, as far as medication history is concerned, that is something that you can get from Prognosis even now.
And this is Prasanna. So we have a few PDMP interfaces with state registries already available. So again, if you want interface with your state's PDMP, you can contact us and we can check if it is already available. If not, we would be able to work on the interface to get that developed.
Okay. The next question, is there a way to add the alternate drug options straight from the RTPB screen?
That's a great question. And that is an enhancement in pipeline. So right now you are not able to directly kind of select that drug and replace what you have already entered. But very soon you will be able to have that as well.
Okay. Thank you. And the next question is a patient consent required to request RTPB information?
No, patient consent is not required for that.
Okay. So the next question is, it's more like a statement, but I will just read it out to you. I usually prescribe 30-day RX, so the patient only gets 7 days, and I need to write a 23-day RX. So how do I do it?
Prasanna, do you want to take it up?
No, I'm not sure I am clear with the question, but like maybe it is like 7 days for retail and 23 days for mail order. If that is the case, then you should be able to add the same drug twice and assign different pharmacies to that with a start date as well. So again, if you can contact us, and I think the contact information maybe we'll share here, so then we can go over your specific question in more detail.
Sure, yes, I have noted down that question, Prasanna, and then we can get back with more details. Yeah, so the next question is, does the information on the prescription benefit information screen change when I change the medication strength?
I would like to answer that. Yes, along with if you basically make any changes to the drug name, the strength, number of days, or even if you basically change the pharmacy, the information, RTPB information would change.
Okay. The next question is, what is the graph icon at the right upper corner?
That is actually one more very exciting feature that we have on the prescription screen from Bizmatics, that is RX Analytics. We can actually go into the details of it by scheduling one more session.
All right. The next question is, can you show me the screen where you were showing multiple eligibility? And can you show me how does the selection of eligibility work?
Sure, I'm moving on to that screen now.
Okay.
So this is our visual indicator, which is red in color if eligibility is not selected. And if it is selected, you'll have the white color font. Even if eligibility is selected, you would use this button to sort of switch to a different plan that the patient could be covered under. So when I click on eligibility here, the system fetches for me all possible plans under which the patient might be covered for a prescription benefit. And as pointed out earlier, this works based on a couple of fields. And the fields are first name, last name, date of birth, gender, and the zip code. The system tries to match these with what's available on the SureScripts network and gets this information for you. So this is where you switch over the eligibility.
Okay. So moving on, the next question, for clients that already have SureScripts set up, will we need to request this service or will it automatically be added?
It is enabled by default. The moment we register a provider for e-prescription, the service is enabled for that provider.
All right. Moving on, what if physician is providing service under one plan, but better medication choice is available under different plan? In that case, can it be prescribed?
Prasanna, do you want to answer this one?
Again, I think that's more in terms of like a business logic, or means what can be done. Means technically it can be done, but from the billing perspective, I think we will need to consult somebody from our billing group or RCM team to kind of understand the differences. Unless I don't know if SureScript team has any.
Yeah, this is Colin from SureScripts. I can comment on that somewhat. I think it ultimately comes down to the coverage that is in question for the visit. So for instance, if it's like a workers' comp visit, but that patient has their own plan outside of that, you obviously would not want to choose whatever coverage is not for the particular visit that they're being seen. Comparably, if you have like a Medicare patient and they have, let's say, supplemental coverage for that Part D plan, you could look at both of those plans to determine which one has kind of the better coverage. I think that's definitely something you could look at. But I think the Bizmatics team answered that question correctly. You'd want to look and kind of review that with your billing staff to kind of make sure you're choosing the right encounter or the right eligibility for that particular visit.
Prasanna, to note, I have made a note of that question also.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can get back with more details. So moving on, the next question is Florida PDMP interface available?
Om, do you know offhand?
No, unfortunately, we'll have to get back to you on this one.
Okay. So the next question is, will this increase, I think it is more in sense of RTPB, will this increase the time I need to spend on every prescription? It may reduce the number of patients I'm able to see. So what would you like to say?
Not really, because if you basically have seen the demonstration provided by Mayuri, we have integrated RTPB very seamlessly in the e-prescribing module or workflow that you have been following in Prognosis. So all that we have basically done is added an RTPB button, which basically blinks and grabs your attention so that if there is prescription benefits available for any prescription that you're trying to prescribe, you can just quickly have a look at it. And if required, you can go ahead and change the medication that would benefit the patient.
And just to add, like initially, yeah, there could be some additional time spent with the patient in terms of the conversation, but I think overall it will help, because otherwise if the patient doesn't feel it because of the cost or they request a change, then going back and then making those changes will take more time. And again, Colin, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think everything that's been mentioned in response is accurate. This is adding more detail, so it is available to you to review. Of course, there's no requirement for providers to look at the real-time prescription benefit information. We hope that it will be useful to you in your role, but we understand providers are busy, and it's something that they can take into consideration if they so choose.
Thank you.
Okay, so the next question is, and I think this might answer a few more questions. Does Prognosis also have electronic prior authorization?
Actually, that is a project that we are working with SureScripts right now as we speak, and we expect to release it sometime later this year. In next few months, you should be having that as well through Prognosis electronic prior authorization.
Okay. Yeah, and I think there is a question, and you kind of answered another question which says, can prior authorization be submitted by any module? So we would be coming.
That is something that we are working on currently and should be available later this year.
So, one last question that we have is, can we get to see RTF and or RTPB information for old encounters?
The answer to that is no. At this point, not every single health plan is set up for providing real-time prescription benefit data. We hope that in the future we have 100% coverage, but there is some room to grow. We have relationships with all of the major pharmacy benefit managers today in time, and more health plans are turning on this service. There is also some CMS mandates that are helping to spur the health plans to turn on that service. But the short answer is I would not expect this 100% of the time, because not every single health plan has that technology enabled on their end yet.
Okay, thank you, Colin. And with that, we would be ending our Q&A session. I have noted down the questions that we need to elaborate and expand more on, and we will get back to the people who asked it. So thank you to all my presenters once again for all the information. And for my attendees, I would like to repeat that we have the resources available in multiple ways. We will have the recording, slide decks, and video available to you in the follow-up email after the webinar. And for Prognosis customers, you can avail all the resources in our webinar section of a resource center. And thank you to all my attendees for being here with us today, despite your busy schedule. We wish that you remain healthy and safe. So bye from all of us here now.